Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'm going to be planting up some summer bedding plants for the front of my new house. So I've got a couple of pots here that I had last year, which are these drain pipe hangers. So these attach onto the drain pipe, and these give you lots of extra growing space because they can be grown vertically, so you can stack several up onto a drain pipe. My drain pipes unfortunately are really quite loose attached to my house. It's not easily to more firmly affix my my drain pipes because there's external insulation on the house, but I've got a couple of handrails near the front of the house which I'm hoping to put these on, bring a bit of colour to the front of the house. And I've also gone and got myself a new pot. So I've got this trough here. So I'll put a link down in the description for this pot. It's a Lechuza pot. I'm not getting paid by the company or anything, but I might make a small revenue from the Amazon affiliate link if anyone does buy through the Amazon affiliate link. So Lechuza is a company that I bought self-watering pots from before. They've worked really well so far, so I thought I'd try it with a trough as well. This one can be attached to a wall or a balcony railings, but I haven't got the right attachments for that. I think you buy them separately. But this is a self-watering pot, so I'm going to set up the self-watering pot today and get this sorted. I'll be interested to see how it does. It's quite nicely made. The Lechuza is actually the same company that makes Playmobil, so they're obviously quite used to plastics and manufacturing of plastics. And the way this self-watering pot works is it's got an inner section. So lifting up these two handles, I can take out the inner section. What happens is the water collects in the bottom here in the reservoir. When the reservoir is full, it overflows out this spout here. There is also a screw on the bottom, so if you have this indoors, you leave that screw on. You don't have to worry about any water coming out the bottom, but because I have this outside and it might rain and fill up too much with water, I'll be unscrewing this cap at the bottom, which is this bit section here, to let the water out. Then this goes inside. There's a layer of gravelly material which stops the compost from getting too wet, but allows the right amount of water to be wicked up. And then there's also a measuring system on this so that you can see how much water's in it. And so I'll just set this up now and get it ready for planting. So the way the watering pots are very simple. As I say, there's a reservoir in the bottom, there's then this float here which is attached to a red rod. As the water level goes up and down, this float is then pushed up and down by the water, and that just gives you the reading at the top there, whether it's at the minimum level or the maximum level. So I've had a couple of larger ones from this company, and they seem to have worked quite well. Depends on your size of your plant, but some of the ones that I've had, they don't need watering too often at all, just once a month. It'll be interesting to see how this does. And because the way that this system works, you do have to put this substrate in the bottom. It means that if you're growing annuals, I find it's not as good because you have to buy this new substrate every time, or you have to try and loosen the roots. So the ones I planted up, I've left them and I've not changed the plants at all. But they're more sizable tree type plants, such as the frangipani. For this I'm going to be putting bedding plants, so I've chosen bedding plants which last more than 1 year. So I'm planting antirrhinums and alyssum, and normally in Scotland they overwinter quite well as long as there's not too hard a frost, and then they'll flower a second year, so I should get a couple of years out of them. So all I need to do now is take a screw out the bottom and then put in this gravel-like material. So looking at the bottom of the pot, I can show you here there's a couple of screws, nice metal brackets there. That's for an attachment that you can use to attach to a wall. I might do that in the future, might get the brackets, see how it does. But for now I'm just going to have it probably sitting on the floor. And another nice feature of this pot actually is that you can, if you do have this attached with brackets to railings or a wall and you want to replace the plants, you can just simply lift up the plants like this, take them out of the reservoir, repot them, and then put the plants back in without having to take apart the brackets that holding this onto the wall or the railings. So I'm going to plant this up with a rich multi-purpose compost, and that should give the plants feed for most of the summer. This compost is supposed to have feed for 3 months, but I'll probably also add a bit of feed myself later on in the season in the form of liquid feed as the plants start growing quite vigorously. But I'll just fill this up now and then start planting up. So the plants I'm putting in this trough this year, it's just going to be a mixture of antirrhinums. So I've got a mixed tray here. It looks like I've got some darker ones here. The darker ones with the red flowers tend to have darker leaves. The other ones I won't know until they start flowering. But this trough's about the right size for 4 of them. It's quite a small trough actually. There are larger ones available, but they're not any thicker. They only seem to be longer. I normally like to put a tall plant at the back and trailing at the front. This trough is very narrow, unfortunately, so it's not really big enough for a trailing plant and a tall growing plant. So I'm just going to plant it with the 4 antirrhinums in the middle, and then they'll bush up and fill this whole section of the trough because it's quite narrow. So the only other thing to say about this trough is it has a little section here for filling up the reservoir. So there's a cap to stop the soil going in. I can just take that off, put the water in there, check on the level, what it is, and just make sure it's always topped up. Now with these self-watering pots, I do find that they don't work properly as a self-watering pot until the roots get more established with the plants. So I'll be watering this as usual, probably for a month or two from the top until the plants get established, get the roots down, and then I'll just use a self-watering feature. It'll be quite interesting to see how this does. I might get some more self-watering bedding planters in the future if this does well. I think this company also does self-watering hanging baskets and loads of other self-watering pots. As I say, the self-watering pots have done well for me for houseplants before. They are quite expensive though, so I only have 2 at the moment. This is only the 3rd self-watering pot I've got, but I'd like to expand my collection of self-watering pots in the future because they do seem to work really well. It really saves me a lot of time when it comes to watering, and it'll be good to see with these bedding plants, because often with bedding plants I'm having to water them every single day. So if this can cut down the amount of watering I'm having to do, that will be quite handy. So I'll go on to now the other planters, which are some old ones I've had for a while. They're for the drain pipe, although I'll be having them on railings. So with these planters I've managed to find some trailing geraniums which just look quite nice in them. Now trailing geraniums, they like quite a free draining soil, they don't like to get too waterlogged, they're more tolerant to semi-arid conditions, so I don't want these to get too wet, and the compost I have is actually designed to hold on to lots and lots of moisture. It's one designed for hanging baskets and pots. The idea is you don't have to water your hanging basket as often, but it means that these geraniums should get a bit waterlogged. So I've added quite a lot of perlite to the mix. That'll really help with the drainage. It's quite an open mix, and that'll help it free drain nicely, but also it keeps the weight down in the planter because the compost is really quite heavy but the perlite is very light and full of air, and that was quite important for planters like this which are going onto railings or are going onto drain pipes, because you don't want too much weight, otherwise it might damage the drain pipe. So that's these 2 planters now planted up. Now I'll need to keep an eye on these. I might need to pinch the ends off these because they might get quite leggy. The trailing geraniums do tend to get quite leggy, but that's the whole point of them. They get long, really straggly growth, and then they hang over the edge. But if I just leave them to grow one long straggly section, then it's going to have quite a lot of bare patches at the top here. So I'll keep an eye on them. If these side branches all grow evenly with the top, I'll just leave them. It'll be like a nice bushy plant, and by the end of summer it will be trailing nicely. But if it's looking like one shoot's going to take over and the rest aren't going to start growing, then I'll cut the top off. That will encourage all the side shoots to grow, and then I'll have a much bushier plant. By the end of summer I'll have a nice even spread of branches all around the pot. So that's these 3 planters now planted up. I do have some other ones that I need to plant up, but at the moment with the lockdown it's quite difficult getting plants and compost, so I'll plant them up at another time. Might not be able to film it, just depends how things are. But I'll get them planted up and I'll give you guys an update in a few weeks when everything's flowering nicely and they're all starting to grow. Now I'm going to try and give these plants a head start. I'm going to keep them in the polytunnel here where it's really warm and sunny, and that should really make them grow fast in the warm conditions, because just yesterday we actually had a little bit of snow here in Scotland. So it's currently the 13th of May, but we had a really cold blast from the north. There was nothing between us really and the North Pole, so when the wind came down we actually managed to get some snow here in May. Luckily it didn't settle, and we didn't get below freezing at this exact location, but there was hard frost further inland. And it's still quite cold at the moment, so if I put these outside they're just going to sit there. They're not going to grow very much at all, and by June they're still not going to be much bigger than they are now. So I'm going to keep them in the polytunnel for now, get them growing really well, and then when the weather does warm up later on in June I can put them outside, nice big healthy plants, and that'll give me a good head start on the season. So that's all for this update, and I'll give you guys an update when these are a bit bigger and they should be in flower sometime middle to late June.